Hey, mamas out there. Thanks for joining me again today for the 29-minute mom. I'm so excited. If you are a business owner, and I know we have so many female business owners and entrepreneurs in the 29-minute mom community. So this show is for you. My guest today is Lindsay Pinchuk. She's an award-winning entrepreneur, and she invested only $500, had a baby on the way, and left a high-powered job as a magazine publishing executive to found her first company, which, get ready, she generated 7 figures in revenue year after year. She's been featured or contributed to the Time magazine, the Doctors, Access Live. She's all over the place, and she is a force to be reckoned with. I'm so excited to have her on the show today. She actually is also the host of her own podcast called Dear FoundHer. And I just want to say welcome to the 29-minute mom. Lindsay, we're so happy you came to talk to us today.
Thanks so much, Jennifer, and thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So I don't even know where to start with you because you have done so much, and it's just amazing to go to your website and see all the things that you have been featured on and the business that you grew. What I love about it, and I can totally relate, is leaving that high-powered job to start your own baby while you are actually having a human baby. That's exactly what happened to me. And I think motherhood does change us, and it helps us want to be more impactful in the life, but also have flexibility and know that our work matters. So let's jump in and just talk about what was it like back then when you were going to leave that job and take this leap of faith into your own company.
Yeah, I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I mean, really and truly, that was not on my radar at all ever. I actually wanted to be a journalist, and that also is that whole full circle is very crazy as well, because I was not a journalist when I worked in magazines. I was selling ad space and ad programs, and I was making a lot more money than a journalist, which was why I took that job, and I loved that job. I loved working. I worked at Hearst magazines. I worked for Good Housekeeping, for Redbook. I mean, really big publications, and I loved what I did. And so I started this community when I was pregnant. I was pregnant and I had no pregnant friends. We all have sixth graders, so I was just first. And I started hosting events, and I really just was trying to find friends for myself and eventual friends for my daughter. And when it came down to me returning from maternity leave, after I was on maternity leave, I had a new boss, and she was not married. She was recently divorced. She was a little older. She was not having kids, at least not biologically. And she made it very clear that she knew about my side hustle. And if I did anything on her time, didn't matter if I was hitting my numbers, which I always did, it was going to be a no-go for her. Everyone on our floor at the Hearst office here in Chicago had a day at home. This was 12 years ago. So this was like before working at home was a thing. Everyone had a day at home. I asked for it. She said no. She was very much like a hard ass on me. And I said to my husband, this woman is going to make my life hell. I mean, she is. She's going to make my life hell. And so I think now is the time to see if this business that I started as a passion project could take off. And I was starting to get sponsors. I was starting to see revenue coming in through ticket sales at events. You have to remember, this was like before Instagram. It was like businesses didn't even have Facebook pages at the time. So it was a whole different time. But I always share this in this story. And then I asked myself, like, what's the worst that happens? And the worst that happens is I leave and it doesn't pan out. And then I have to get a new job. And can I live with that? And the answer was yes. And to your point, I wanted flexibility. I wanted to be around for my daughter. Like, my whole perspective of working changed. And while I loved my job at Hearst, I was working for someone else, traveling a lot, and I was traveling on someone else's time. And I also had to entertain. And while that sounds amazing, and it is before you have a family, to be forced to go out to dinner with, account executives and junior media planners, every single night of every single week, that's just not fun when all you want is to get home to see your baby.
Yeah, I can totally relate. Very similar story. So you mentioned that this was back before social media and all of that. It leads me to a question just out of curiosity. Do you feel like marketing has gotten a little bit more difficult because the markets are so saturated and the women that we're trying to reach are bombarded every single day with, messages from all angles as soon as they pick up their cell phone? How do you feel about that?
I do a little bit. My answer to this question is yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we are getting messages from every different direction now, and there's so many social platforms, and I think everyone feels like they need to keep up with all of it. No, in the sense that grassroots marketing still works,
Mhm.
and the issue is most businesses aren't taking advantage of that. And so, like, when I get into a business, whether it's, I've had 9-figure companies who have hired me to work on this with them, and I get in to talk with them and we talk about what they're doing, and everything is like they push out their product on social media. You can't just do that. Like, there are a lot of other things that you can and should be doing to market your business. One of which, for example, is partnerships. And yes, there are partnerships on social media, but there are a lot of ways to partner with entities off social media, and a lot of people don't do it. And so I think that oftentimes business owners, big and small, don't see the benefit and the ease of something that's right in front of them and that they can do for free. And oftentimes when I point it out to them, they're like, "Oh, like, yes, that's like a great idea to do
Yeah.
that." And so yes and no. I think you now have to add in social media to your mix, but I also think that you cannot forget about those guerrilla marketing tactics like events and the things that are take place in person. And I mean, there are things that really and truly should be happening outside of social media for marketing your business.
Which actually makes me happy. I think marketing that way is so much more fun. I'm one of those people that is just burnt out on social media. I delegate a lot of it now. It doesn't seem fun to me. So let's talk to the women out there that are those small business owners that are wanting to scale this year. And let's face it, the opportunity is endless nowadays for women. You can work from home, you can use your computer, you can do all sorts of things. But I think that there's a lot of women that are just like, the sky's the limit. So where do they start? What are some steps that they could do if they want to be serious about scaling their business and their community, say in the next 6 to 12 months?
So the first thing that I would say, and this is sort of an answer to your question, but it's very important when we talk about scalability, and a lot of people don't do it, is if you have a business where like the business is you and you are the face of the business and you want to scale the business, you have to find a way to scale that is not scaling you. And I
That
think
is a huge, awesome statement. Say that again.
you have to find a way to scale your business that is not scaling you. And I will say I made that mistake with Bump Club. And a lot of my first company was tied to me. I was the face of it. During the pandemic, I was leading all of our webinars, all of our live events. And at that point, we had been acquired. But I was still the face of it and I was working for the company. And I was offering strategies to take me out of the business because I knew I wanted to leave the business eventually. And no one was taking me up on these strategies. I was like, we have to bring in new moms. We have to bring in new faces. Like, I was offering up all of these opportunities so that it wasn't so heavy reliant on me. And no one was really taking me up on that. And, so when I did leave, it was definitely more problematic for them than it was for me at that point. But I couldn't have left my business before I sold it without going out of business because the business was so reliant upon me. And so I think when you're thinking about scaling your business, you need to have a blueprint that can be executed at scale in many different markets, but that you are not the linchpin for that.
Mhm.
Whether it's finding other people who can carry out your method or your process, or you sell your process to other people to utilize if you're a service-based business, like that is a great way to scale your business, right? So that's the first thing that I want to say, because I think it becomes very heavy for women to have that, like that pressure to be the face of a business and to show up in many different places. And when you're only one person, you cannot scale a business where it's just you, right?
Well, and a lot of people listening will be thinking, that's what I ideally want to do, but they are not ready to pay a team, or they want to, it's even hard to trust your business with other people because you always feel like as the owner, you're the one that cares the most. So talk to the woman that is thinking, I want to do that, but I'm afraid to expand my help and, more importantly, afford more help.
So the first thing in terms of help that I think is a huge opportunity right now, especially for women, is you probably can afford help even if you think you can't afford help. There's a lot of ways to get help. Number one, when I was first starting Bump Club, I traded help with people. And I think a lot of people listening are like, "Oh, really? Like I can do that?" Yes, you can. If you have something that you offer to someone, or you obviously, everyone who has a business has something they offer. Find someone who wants what you offer and trade it with them. And I think a lot of business owners too, when they're first starting out, will reciprocate on that. Or even established business owners, if they have the time and feel like you have a viable product, they understand where you've been or where you are. They've been there before. And so they will help you with that. So find ways to trade. I think that's like a huge opportunity. I also think it's a huge opportunity to find someone on a project basis. Like
Yeah.
come up with a budget and find someone who can alleviate that pressure from you for a few hours or a day a week or whatever the parameters are that you set forth. You don't have to all of a sudden you want help. You don't have to say, okay, well, I have to pay someone six figures and they have to be full time and I have to give them insurance. Like you don't. And I think we're at a crux right now in the workforce where there are a lot of women, moms especially, who left the workforce during COVID, who have incredible experience and who want to get back into the workforce flexibly and would be willing to take on your projects at a smaller rate just to have that back in. And so I think look for people who can contract, who can freelance, who can grow with you and don't necessarily want a full-time job. And I think there's a big misconception too, especially when it comes to like marketing and social media, right? That like you have to hire like a recent grad or like you want to, those people need full-time jobs. But don't look at that pool. Look at the pool of women and moms who want flexibility and who have been around and who have the experience and who place an emphasis on their quality of life over their paycheck and might be willing to take a job for a little bit less. So that, in terms of hiring help, I think that that's where I would start. Did I answer your question? I feel like I
Yeah,
went off on
I
a
love it.
tangent.
I think I love that you're bringing up the bartering idea, and I love that you also mentioned grassroots, because I feel like we have gotten away from some of the foundational things that do really grow business, which all comes down to relationships.
Yep.
And women love networking and building relationships. That's one thing that's fantastic about working with women. So tell us, if they're going to, if you decide, okay, this year I want to scale, what is the one thing you would have women focus on first? Because I'm all about prioritizing and time management.
So if you are going to scale your business, the first thing that I would do is figure out how.
Mm-hmm.
How is it that you are going to scale? Are you going to offer your services at mass capacity online and do like a webinar? Are you going to maybe instead of one-on-one do an in-person group event or a group class or a group workshop? How is the scale going to work? How and how big? I think that is like kind of the first thing. And I will say this and this is like a little bit of a tangent with Bump Club. We had a blueprint for what we did in Chicago. And we hosted events. We built a community of moms and moms to be, and moms in other markets were like, we want this here. And so we started doing it in other markets. And our blueprint worked in some of the other markets, but not all of them. And, so that was a very big learning lesson, that you really have to look at what your blueprint is and where you're taking it before you actually get there. And that was a learning lesson for me. And we ended up retracting a couple of our geographical partnerships, getting a national partner, which was Target and then Nordstrom, and using those bigger strategic partnerships to grow our business and to scale our business in all of the markets across the country. So it took a little bit of like realignment to figure that out, right? After you figure out how you are going to scale and how big and how it's going to work, this is the biggest miss for every business owner, honestly and truly, is people don't tell people. You have to tell people what you're doing. And I think like that it sounds like it's like I'm saying it and you're smiling and laughing and like, but it's so true. Like if you don't tell
Sure.
your network, which is your relationships, that you are taking your business and scaling it in X, Y, and Z way, and here is how you can support it, who's going to support you? So relationships, like you said, are key. And the people who are in your network and who are in your like business community, I'm not saying your audience community, your customer community, people who are in your network are going to be the first people to help you if they can. They're going to be the first people to spread the word. They're going to be the first people to say, oh, you're going to be doing this or launching a store in another city. Well, guess what? I know so-and-so, and I'm going to connect you. And so you need to really get it out there to not just the social media world, but to your email contacts, to your LinkedIn, and really tell people what it is that you're doing, how they can support you. And even if they can't be your customer, what is it that they can do to help spread the word? And that is the number one thing, whether you're starting a business or scaling a business, that you need to do when there's a change.
And I think if you change your mindset from being like a typical salesman to a woman that's passionate, excited about what she's creating and providing service for somebody, then it's easier to sell. It's easier to talk about your ideas and to sell yourself.
It's interesting because with Bump Club, I didn't sell first at all. I mean, like I started hosting events. I didn't lose money. They were all in partnership. They were all free. They were all in partnership. And we started building this database. And then and then people started following us on social media later. But, I wasn't asking people to transact. It was like I was showing up. I was pregnant. I was sharing my issues as a pregnant woman. People were conversing with me. People were connecting with me through that life stage. And then when it came time to host our first like paid event, it was because people were asking me for it. It wasn't because I was like, oh, I have this idea and I think I'm going to do this. It was like people were like, can you bring in a speaker to talk about breastfeeding? And so guess what we did? We brought in a speaker. We had 100 people pay $50 to come to it. We served dinner. I negotiated a good rate with a restaurant and I was able to make a profit on it. And that was great. And then the next month we did one with a sleep expert. And I ended up getting a sponsor. And so, because I had that built-in community that was growing, but it was never the sales process first. And truly, it was never that until I was sold. And that was a big part of why I wanted to leave the corporation that sold me, was because I felt that everything was about the sale. And I felt like everything that was on social media was sponsored and everything was about the bottom line. And I am a very big believer that if you show up and serve, that is a bridge to transaction and your bottom line will grow automatically. And it does. And it did for me for 9 years.
Yeah. You talk a lot about partnerships, Lindsay, and you have on your website, you've worked with some really big brands, Huggies, Ulta, Honest Company, Target, Nordstrom. What do you contribute to getting your foot in the door with brands like that?
So my whole thing is that you have to start somewhere. And with Bump Club, for example, I started by offering them exposure for free. And, I said, I'm having this event. It's a prenatal workout. We have 50 to 75 people coming. Would you like to send samples? Would you like to send product? Would you like to provide something for a giveaway? I'll put your logo on the collateral. And the brands understood that I had this market of pregnant people that they wanted to reach, and they took a chance on sending. Really all it cost them was shipping and the cost of their product. And I was then able to turn around and take it out to a couple of people to try to get a paid sponsor. And no one knew that those people didn't pay. That was between me and them. It wasn't between me and the world. So then I took the collateral and I took it to a couple of baby brands and I said, we have these events. I'd love to see your logo here. Would you like to talk about sponsorship? And I was able to sell in my first few brands. Graco was one of the first brands that partnered with me, Summer Infant and Britax. And Britax was still is a part. They all are still partners of Bump Club, but Britax, the woman there is still someone that I'm very close with, who took a chance on me. And so from there, we got those logos on, and then I took them out to more car seat companies and stroller companies. And I said, look, like these people are partnering with us. Don't you want to too? And eventually we built up those partnerships to a place where retailers were noticing us. And both Target and Nordstrom reached out to us.
That's awesome.
It was not we did not reach out to them. They both reached out to us, and we had very successful partnerships with both of them. The Target one is still ongoing with Bump Club.
So you ended up selling Bump Club.
I did.
Okay. And I know you have your podcast now. What else are you doing these days?
Yeah. So when I sold Bump Club, I worked there for 2.5 years, and it was it was a natural progression. I had people in my contact list and my network who were reaching out to me during that last year, and everyone was kind of still home. The pandemic was still going on. It was early 2021. And they were asking me to take on projects like, can you help us to build our community? Can you help us with our social strategy? And I couldn't, because I was still working about 80 to 100 hours a week for Bump Club. And I realized, and I wasn't happy. And I realized that all of these other projects would pay me more, and I would be able to like enjoy my life and my kids, which is why I sold the company. So it took about 6 months to work through the arrangement of me leaving. And then when I did, I sent out an email and I said, I'm taking clients. And at the time, I wasn't so specific about what I was going to do and how I was going to help people. I was kind of like, I'm a marketing consultant. But that has evolved over the last year. And essentially, I do a couple of different things. I consult for big brands, and I consult them on building and monetizing their community through email, social media, content, events, and partnerships. And then I also coach on that as well. So, and that kind of came up really like on accident. Like I was teaching a class, and then a couple of people were like, well, I really want to work with you one-on-one. And so I created a coaching program, and now I take 5 coaching clients per month, and they're all female founders, and we work through whatever their issues are to get them to a place where they are building and monetizing their community. I also public speak, and then I have the podcast.
Yeah, I love that. It's so funny though, the coaching industry, I never set out to be a coach either. It's just when you are in a business, and for anyone listening, this could happen to you. You learn systems and you learn an industry, and you learn that by jumping off the diving board, learning how to swim and realizing, okay, the backstroke didn't work as good as the breaststroke today. And then over time, by your mistakes, you create a program that works for you. And that's when people want to learn it. And so the big thing I want women to know is that you did not have it all figured out when you started. I did not have it all figured out when I started, but look at what happens when you decide, you know what, this is my life and I want to live it my way. And I have a gift to give the world. I just have to put it in some sort of container.
100%. And it's funny because I always say what took me, 10 years to learn is really now taking me like 3 to 5 months to implement in my new business. My new business has grown so fast over the last year, far faster than obviously it did the first time. But to your point, I built a system and I know how to work it. And I want to kind of clarify. And I think a lot of people often have questions with this. Like, I started consulting because of my networks. And when I consult, I do the work. I go in and I create a plan and a strategy. I hand it to them and I help them implement it with their team. But when we coach, it's really for those female founders who don't have the budget to pay me to do it for them. And I guide them along the process of doing it themselves. And they all do. And it's amazing. And, those 3 months essentially could save them 3 years in the long run. So yeah, to your point, like it's really building upon your experience and sharing that knowledge that, that you have learned and built up over the last, I have a career in marketing of over 20 years.
I know. How does this happen? I was just teaching a masterclass today talking about what my life was 20 years ago with that marketing degree and where it is now. It's nothing like I planned.
No, me neither. Crazy.
Absolutely nothing. But so one of the questions that we could have asked earlier, but I still want to ask, since you're coaching, and it's relates to everything you've done, is you have done a lot of media. And what advice do you have for women that want to be seen? I mean, they want to be out there. They want to, you know, I want to first preface it by saying all these things as an entrepreneur, it is like when you're starting out as a one-man show, it's a lot. I mean, you're like, do I focus on marketing today? Do I focus on, you know, making connections? How much time do I network? And you still want to be a mom. And you're like, okay, I have to reach out to these television shows or these radio shows. Slim it down for us.
So, first things first, do not pay for media. Okay. If you pay for media, that is not media. That's not earned media. That's called an advertisement. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. I think a lot of people think that media and publicity is TV, radio, print magazines. It's not just that. Publicity is when anyone shares your story in your business with their community and their audience. So, it could be an influencer, it could be just another person in your community. So, my whole notion with getting publicity is you have to start somewhere. Start by sharing your story. What is it that you do? How do you do it? And why? And the why is very important. That is the hook. People want to know why you do what you do and why you are able to sell your services, what credentials you to do that. So you want to be sharing your story over and over and over and everywhere you show up, in your email, on social media, on your website. You want to get people talking. And the more you share your story, then people will start sharing it for you, and they will. And you will become the person who started a company with $500 in their pocket and then sold it. That's what my one line is, and that's what people know me for. When you start sharing it, then others start sharing it, then it gets the attention of more people. And it's a lot easier when people are talking about you and talking about your business to reach out to a local publication, a blog, your alumni publication. I just did an amazing episode of Dear FoundHer with this woman, Annie Scranton. She owns a PR company in New York called Pace PR. And she gave really great ideas for people starting out that maybe don't have a giant budget. If you land a great placement right off the bat, that's amazing, but that's not necessarily going to happen for everybody. If you want to be in the media and in the press and you feel like you cannot get yourself there, find a publicist, a freelance publicist. You do not have to go to an agency and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a month. I never did. Find another woman, another mom who has their own gig going, who doesn't have the overhead of an office space and a whole team, someone who knows how to pitch and who has media connections. And those women exist. I'm telling you, they exist. I was the first client of my original publicist. And so we didn't trade, but like I took a chance on her. So I got a pretty good rate. I grew with them. And then I ended up, growing out of them. And I had to move to someone who had more national connections. But once you start getting a little bit of press, it's a lot easier to get more press because you've already been in the press. So you have to start at like that bottom rung, Does that?
Yeah.
I could talk about this all day.
I know I could talk with you all day. And here's the thing I want to point out too, is when you are doing these things where you're telling your story and you're talking on social media, that's good practice for when all of a sudden you have a TV camera in your face.
Yep.
And so the more you can, I mean, when I started out, I didn't have that kind of practice. So, for years, there was really no social media 20 years ago.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I'm on a TV segment and there's a camera. So nowadays women have that privilege of being able to go on Zoom like this, video yourself talking, redo it 15 times if you have to, see what you're, doing wrong, see what kind of look you have, practice, and don't wait until you're perfect to get your story out there because it'll never happen. So just start talking on an Instagram Live, be your real self. Don't you think nowadays we want to see those real raw women?
Yep. People, you have to show up as yourself. You're not going to be for everyone, but you're going to be for the right people for you. And so show up as yourself without a doubt. And I also want to say about the press and publicity, like I didn't land a national news a national segment overnight. I wasn't in Time Magazine until my very last year in Bump Club. And it was because of the education we did for parents surrounding COVID. I mean, you know what I mean? It wasn't like this happened overnight. It really took a while. And, it was like I had this publicist that got me, that knew how to pitch me to the local press, and I got one segment, and that's really all it took. And then they were able to take that one segment to the other local press. And then I started getting booked regularly as an expert because I was good. And, and I was easy to work with, and I was amenable, I mean, it's not just about your camera presence. It's about you as a person too, and showing up and being respectful to the people who work at the station. And, I have a lot of relationships now with people at the networks, especially here in Chicago. And, you have to just start small and know that if you get something big, that's amazing, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, such good advice. So tell the listeners, if they listen to this episode today, which I'm sure they will feel really fired up, and just kind of like you're a breath of fresh air, because you're going back to, let's quit thinking we have to do everything at once. Let's narrow in on some things that we actually can change in our business starting today. Like, these are all within our power to change. You can start to share your story with everybody. You can do a partnership with someone for free. You can ask a publicist that you know to work with you, and we can do all these things. This isn't like you need $1 million to make $1 million. Okay. So I think that is very inspiring to women. Tell me real fast, and then I want you to share everybody how they can find you. But with the pandemic that has just happened, and I always think there's always good that comes out of bad situations. What are the golden opportunities right now that you see? Because life has changed.
Life has absolutely changed. And I think that number one, there's a very big opportunity for women to control their own destiny and to work for themselves. This is, I could do a whole podcast on this as well, but like, there are a lot of changes in the workforce right now that are leading, people to quit, to quiet quit, to not do their work properly, whatever it might be. And all of these women who left or who maybe feel stuck in a job have the upper hand in that they can ask for what they want.
Right.
Either in their workplace, or they can leave and start freelancing and contracting, because every company wants to save money right now. So I really think there is an opportunity for women to control their own destiny. And also, I think everyone, this whole world has seen that we can work from everywhere and anywhere and be flexible. And so, I always say, if you want something done, give it to a busy mom, because a busy mom will get it done faster and better than anyone else on this planet. And so I do think that, our society is coming around to that a little bit more. And so I think, like I said, there's an opportunity for you to really think about what it is you want, how you want to do it, and really write down those steps of what do I need to do to get there, and just go out and do it. And I really think that women now more than ever can have exactly what they want.
It's like, first of all, thank God we can have flexibility now, because I remember when I was in corporate America going to my first level management and saying, okay, when I have this baby, I would like to have 1 day off a week to work from home. And they were like, yeah, no.
I was told no.
Yeah.
I was told no.
But I was laughing because at the big convention the year before, when it's like, rah, we hit our goals, they said, next year, we're going to be one of the #1 ranked companies to work for women. Well, you're not going to be that company if you're not embracing a person that's getting off maternity leave. So that was a joke, right? But nowadays, flexibility, working from home, it's awesome because we can go on our computers, we can work wherever, and that is a gift to women.
Well, and I also want to say, like, that you asked about what the opportunities are. I mean, this pandemic has given us an opportunity to meet and connect with people like you and I are doing right now that you never would have met and connected with before. I have talked to people for my podcast that I like, blown away that these people would have given me the time of day. And it's because it's so easy now. And so, I think networking is a lot easier too. So if you're unsure about something, set up a Zoom with, a friend of a friend, or figure out who you want to talk to and start to network. You don't have to meet them when they come to town for a business convention. You can totally Zoom with them. And the other thing I want to say, and I should have said this before about publicity, utilize podcasts.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we didn't really even talk about this, and we're two podcasters, but like, podcasting has changed my business. I'm sure it's changed yours. You don't need to have your own. There are thousands and millions of podcasts out there. Go out and find some to be on. It's great practice in terms of sharing your story and talking about your business. It also gives you content to share without having to make it on your own. You have this content after you have a whole podcast, and usually the producer or the host will give you assets for it. So there's just a lot of benefits to being on podcasts. And then you can use that as publicity to get other publicity.
Absolutely. I mean, and don't be afraid to reach out to podcast hosts and pitch them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I get pitches every day. I'm sure
Every
you
day.
do.
All day, every day.
And you just don't know what they're looking for unless you try. So I love that. So if anybody wants to work with you, where can they find you?
You can find me at lindsaypinchuk.com or on Instagram at Lindsay Pinchuk. I do answer. It's me. It's not a virtual assistant or anything. And you can also find me on my podcast every week, twice a week, Dear FoundHer, everywhere you listen to podcasts.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the 29-Minute Mom. You are just a wealth of information. So happy you came on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.